13 may be unlucky for some, but it won't be unlucky for you if you nail your ads and drops on your waiver wire this week. We'll take you through all the best options for both on the Fantasy First Down. I'm Ben Wasley. Welcome to the Fantasy First Down. It's the last week of November and the last week of Movember. If you are interested in this charity, please consider donating. It's one very close to my heart. Now, we're going to be talking about waiver wire ads and drops this week, as we always do. If you have any questions, you can hit us up on my socials or in the comments below. Plus, it would be great if you could like and subscribe on YouTube. But let's get into it for week 13. We're going to kick things off with the quarterbacks, and Jackson Dart looks like he's likely to be back this week. He has a pretty solid matchup against the Patriots. If you're going to attack the Patriots, it's going to be through the air. So that would be the direction I'd be going with Dart. I do think he's going to be someone that's got some upside into the playoffs, but I'm only starting him if I don't have a reliable starter already. Jacoby Brissett also has some at least temporary upside because the Buccaneers are a very good matchup for opposing quarterbacks. I think he could have one more at least good week, and then we'll have to see what happens. He's worth picking up if you're struggling at quarterback and searching for a little bit of upside. Jaden Daniels also has that upside, but definitely won't be happening this week because I doubt he's even going to be playing. And if he did, then taking him against the Broncos in his first week back isn't going to work anyway. For that reason, I'm not even considering Marcus Mariota. But Daniels does have upside if he is back by the fantasy playoffs. If you're streaming at quarterback, Daniels is someone I would probably rather use come the fantasy playoffs. And JJ McCarthy is a streaming option in the playoffs, but we need to see him be a little bit better first. He's going to struggle this week against the Seahawks. I wouldn't consider him starting him, but we do know there's 4 teams on bye in week 14, and he gets an easy matchup there in the Commanders. Plus, he also has a great schedule in the fantasy playoffs, all top 12 matchups and a top matchup in week 15. So he's someone worth picking up just to see what happens. Running back wise, none of these names are shocking. They're all kind of in committees of some sort. Tracy Manangai and Gainwell are all getting the better of their committees at the moment, though Gainwell's kind of been a little bit lucky based on how the last couple of matchups have worked. If Aaron Rodgers comes back, I'm not as excited about Gainwell, but he does play against the Bills this week, and we know that is a great matchup for a running back. Kamani Vidal, meanwhile, he does have a lower floor because you just don't know what's going to happen with Amari and Hampton potentially coming back this week. So season long is someone I'm not as interested in. This week should be solid against the Raiders, but I'm not overly excited about him. As soon as Hampton comes back, though, he is very much droppable. In a deeper league, and I think a lot of people are going to be rushing to get Devin Neal. In a shallow league, he's not that exciting because we don't even know exactly what's going to happen there. They might potentially pick up another running back. Alvin Kamara might be back soon. We might see a lot of Taysom Hill. But in a deeper league where any starting running back has to be on rosters, Neal is very much the starting running back. He has been on my stashes for running backs list, though very deep on the list, because we know he's not going to get a lot of great usage even when he's the starter, and he gets that opportunity presumably this week against a Dolphins team that has been a little bit hot and cold, but I do think Neal could be solid, at least for this week, someone you can start in a deeper league. Chris Rodriguez, similar situation. Interesting to see if anything changes coming out of the bye week. He's not very exciting against the Broncos, but again, in a deeper league where you are rostering every starting running back, Rodriguez appears to be that in that ugly committee with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt and also Jeremy McNichols taking the receiving work. One of them goes down, though, and all of a sudden, Rodriguez certainly has a little bit more upside. Emmanuel Wilson was very solid last week, but there's a lot of talk of Josh Jacobs coming back. And realistically, even if Jacobs doesn't come back, he's taking on the Lions, which isn't the easiest running back matchup. For that reason, I'm not overly excited about Wilson, but still someone that's worth stashing. I certainly wouldn't be dropping him, and in a deeper league, he absolutely must be rostered. Tyjae Spears in a PPR league, whenever the team is behind, he's certainly the guy to go to. It's very hard to run on the Jaguars. I'm not overly excited about him this week, but given he is getting the receiving work, if someone's going to do it for the Titans this week, it will be Spears. He should be owned in most deep leagues just because you need someone that's going to give you that solid double-digit points a lot of weeks. And waiver stashes, you all know my favorites. Tyler Algier and Blake Corum are the guys that I like most. Brian Robinson, also very solid. I just worry about whether we see a lot of use check on third downs if Christian McCaffrey is injured. And Devin Singletary, I've just slid him in there because didn't have enough space in the other two categories. He does seem to still be getting a lot of the goal line work. We see a Tyrone Tracy injury, all of a sudden Singletary is going to have quite a lot of upside, but it does seem like Tracy's getting a lot more of the short yardage work. It's really only when it's within 1 or 2 yards of the goal line they're sliding Singletary in there, and that hurts his upside a lot. He is very, very boom bust at the moment, but as a stash, he offers you some upside, and he's still someone you can start if you're in trouble. So he kind of fits in as a waiver stash for me. If you're looking for another true stash, someone like an Isaiah Davis could be a solid option for you. Make sure you check out my Thursday shows when I go through all of the best running back stashes for the Streamers and Stashes show. Wide receivers, and a lot of these guys should be owned in a lot more leagues. Troy Franklin is essentially the number one in Denver. I've had him consistently over Courtland Sutton. He's had more points than Sutton in the vast majority of the last 8 or so weeks. He gets a fantastic matchup against the Commanders. He's going to be in that wide receiver 2 conversation this week. Must be owned in every league and should be started in most. Michael Wilson had a couple of great weeks, gets a great matchup, even if Marvin Harrison Jr. is back. I'm still starting Wilson against the Buccaneers. Alec Pierce had a disappointing week and gets another tough matchup against the Texans, but he's someone I desperately want on my roster because I feel like going into the fantasy playoffs, he's going to have a lot more upside. And Chris Godwin, in a shallow league, I'm willing to take that risk. In a deeper league, he's actually less interesting because I think there's a very low chance he's very good, but he could be. He could be particularly good because he's in the slot for the Buccaneers. They've got some tough matchup, but the slot receiver for the Bucs is the one where the money is. And for that reason, if we see a situation where Baker Mayfield comes back and Chris Godwin is playing full snaps out of the slot, then all of a sudden he's someone that has a heap of upside. It really depends on what happens with a Mike Evans. It depends on what happens and how much Amika Ibuka is traveling there. So that means that Godwin definitely has a very, very low floor. But on a shallow league, you really want to risk it for high upside guys with low floors. In a deep league, maybe you don't have the roster space. And a little bit deeper, Christian Watson does appear to kind of be the number one for the Packers. He's kind of fighting it out with Romeo Dobbs. Who knows what happens when Reed gets back? They've still got Golden floating around. He was injured this week, and also Wicks. So it's an awkward situation. It is an okay matchup against the Lions. You can definitely pass on the Lions. So for that reason, I'm okay with using Watson. I'm just not as excited about him as some others, but he's definitely towards the top of the list for me. Parker Washington had another solid week. This isn't a great matchup against the Titans, but he's someone that should still be rostered in the vast majority of leagues. Jameer DK does seem to be the clear number one for the Titans in that same game. I think he could easily have a very good game, even if Imanor is back and playing. It does seem like it's going to be DK. He was the guy that I liked out of DK and Imanor in the preseason. I was kind of against consensus on that. I was quite high on DK and it's exciting to see him getting started so early. I thought it might take till next year before this breakout happened, but it seems to have happened early. A little bit helped by injuries and a little bit helped by the team sucking and transitioning to their young guys. And Jaden Higgins does have a lot of upside. Actually started playing a lot in one wide receiver sets, and they used a lot of them last week. I think they go back to more 3 and 2 wide receiver sets this week. That will help Nico Collins, but you're still going to see Higgins be the clear wide receiver too. The problem is there's a lot of other guys floating around. Christian Kirk and Jalen Nola kind of sharing the slot. And in those 2 wide receiver sets, you're still seeing enough Xavier Hutchinson that Higgins is missing out a little bit. If he can become a clear-cut starter, then he's someone that's very interesting to me because he's got a lot of upside. But at the moment, he is more of a stash who I'm starting in perfect matchups. This against the Colts is probably not one of them because their secondary is looking pretty good at the moment. Super Deep and Luther Burden is the number 3 guy for the Bears, but that whole situation's awkward. They're still using enough Olamide Zaccheaus. The Burden's not really getting enough snaps to be exciting. He's over 50%, but that's the best that can be said about it. He's getting enough looks, and I would hold him just to see what happens, but I'm not starting him yet. Andre Yosevas, on the other hand, I am starting now because I think T. Higgins probably misses the game this week, given he's got a concussion and is unlikely to be back in time. For that reason, against the Ravens, I think he could be very interesting. It will be a lot of chase, but Yosevas will probably get enough touches and has that touchdown upside to be interesting in a very deep league. Tyler Lockett started to lose a lot of snaps to Dante Thornton in 2 wide receiver sets. And there were a lot of 2 wide receiver sets because they were using a lot of Michael Mayer to kind of free up Brock Bowers as being their 3rd wide receiver. And they kind of continue that even after Mayer's injury with Ian Thomas and a little bit of Carter Runyon as well. So for that reason, Lockett was hurt, but this week he kind of fought back, got a lot more touches over Thornton. Thornton was on the field less. Lockett was playing, 70% snaps. That's enough for me in a super league to feel okay about him. Don't love the matchup away at the Chargers, but I do think he's someone that you should be rostering in a very deep league. And John Mechie does seem to be, along with Adonai Mitchell, the number one guy for the Jets. Very, very boom bust. This is not a great matchup against the Falcons. You can run on the Falcons, but you can't easily pass on them. I'm not excited about Mechie this week, but I would definitely roster him in a super deep league, and I think Mitchell is someone worth rostering as well. Tight ends, and Orlando Gudson did get a lot of drops last week. They were on bye, and he had a couple of poor weeks, but he is still playing a massive amount of snaps in a team that should be a lot better, especially this week against the Raiders. So I'm very interested in adding Gadsden in pretty much any league. For me, he's a top 6 tight end rest of the season. I definitely want him on my roster. Theo Johnson has been pretty good. It'll be interesting to see how this pans out moving forward with all 3 wide receivers now healthy, now that Hodgins is in there, along with Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton. That's a lot of solid receivers that could be getting the ball that are very experienced in this offense. They're essentially the same receivers they had starting 2 years ago. So for that reason, I think it's entirely possible that Johnson takes a bit of a step back. But he is the tight end 10 on the season, and he's available in a lot of leagues. So if you're struggling at tight end, he is someone that's worth picking up. I think Brendan Strange has a little bit more upside. Only played 70% snaps. That should rise now that he's back and healthy and has played another week. Takes on the Titans. Not the greatest matchup, but he does have some good matchups coming up. He is someone I'm definitely rostering. Maybe not starting quite this week. Depends on who else is available. He's definitely someone I want to roster. And in a very, very, very deep league, Brock Wright is someone I'm interested in. I picked him up recently in the 32-team league. I think you can definitely go shallower than that and pick him up. I think he's going to be on the cusp of that tight end 20 region. The kind of league where you definitely want to be rostering Isaiah Likely is the type of league where you want to be rostering Brock Wright. If you're excited about Dawson Knox being available, if Likely is someone you are interested in, if you had Cade Otton at the start of the season, that's the sort of range we're talking about for Brock Wright. If there's an injury to a Jamison Williams or an Amon-Ra St. Brown, all of a sudden Wright becomes very interesting. And in the right matchup, I think, no pun intended, I think he could be very solid this week. Kickers and DSTs, and Evan McPherson has been good so far this season, or at least in the later part of the season. It'll be interesting to see how that looks with Joe Flacco coming back, but the Ravens do tend to be a good matchup for kickers, so I am starting McPherson this week. And Zane Gonzalez has had a couple of big weeks, top 5 the last 2 weeks, and the Falcons get the best kicker matchup in football in the Jets. He is definitely a start for me. Meanwhile, the Chargers are facing Geno Smith, who's struggled in general for the vast majority of the season with the Raiders. They're a great DST start, as are the Jaguars, who've been much improved of late. They get the Titans, who are starting to step things up a little bit, but I still think the Jaguars are going to be a good fantasy option. As for guys you should be dropping to create space, well, most of these are kind of obvious. They're similar names to what you've seen in the past, but a couple of these running backs are new. I think with the likelihood that Bucky Irving's going to be back this week and the way they're using Rashad White and Sean Tucker, White's pretty much droppable for me in every league where you're not relying on him purely as a PPR option. I do think that he could drop out and hardly be used at the moment. If you're not starting someone like a Justice Hill earlier in the year, that sort of situation where it really is just a receiving back, and I think that's what could happen with White, then White really is droppable in your league. You could wait one more week to see what it looks like when Irving is back, but for me, in most leagues, there's a better player available with more upside as we head into the playoffs, because we know even with an injury to Irving or to Tucker, White doesn't suddenly become a fantasy star with all the bye weeks done. Nick Chubb, again, been very disappointing with Woody Marks taking over. Chubb's such a good player, but just not effective in this offense. Marks is the guy they're going to a lot of the time. They're using Chubb in ugly situations where they're obviously running, and he's not able to be very efficient in that situation. Caleb Johnson didn't even get a snap last week. He's very droppable. Amari Demicato, with the likelihood that we'll probably get someone like a Trey Benson back. Bam Knight still taking most of the touches. Michael Carter getting a lot of the receiving work. Demicato, they can afford to rest. I don't think he's going to be the lead back at any point in time. Rashard Smith, same situation. Won't be the lead back, just a receiving back. Not interesting to me in that similar category to someone like a Rashad White will be soon. In a shallower league, Tony Pollard is just not getting enough touches to be worthwhile. They need to be leading and leading consistently for Pollard to be useful to you. Spears is the guy to own. And even then, I'm not that interested in Spears unless it's a deeper PPR league. And Bachel Tuden, we were excited about him. There was a possibility he was taking it over from Travis Etienne. That clearly didn't happen this week. It is still possible that Tuden starts to get more touches once he's healthier again. Clearly got injured in week 11, but I'm still not worth rostering him in a shallower league. The odds of him fully taking over are very low. Wide receivers, Rashid Shaheed and Torrey Horton. I just don't like this whole Seahawks situation. If your name's not JSN, then I'm not interested in you. Even Cooper Kupp probably droppable in most leagues as well. Shaheed just not getting the touches, not getting the snaps. Horton's on IR, which obviously makes him droppable, but I don't want either of them. Keon Coleman obviously hasn't played the last 2 weeks. He can go. Marquise Brown, look, he's kind of splitting snaps with Juju Smith-Schuster. This is an ugly situation where they're not really using him much at all. He does have some boom bust upside in a very, very deep league, and he's a DFS option, but not interesting to me in a normal fantasy league. Same thing with Matthew Golden, who's splitting with Dontavian Wicks when he's healthy, which he's not at the moment. Clearly behind Christian Watson, clearly behind Romeo Dobbs, and of course, we will see that Reed will hopefully come back at some point in time. In a shallower league, I think with Chris Godwin getting healthier and Mike Evans potentially coming back, Tez Johnson, certainly someone that you can drop in a very shallow league and someone you should consider dropping in the coming weeks, depending on what happens, because I do think his snaps will drop once Godwin gets more involved. It is possible that Godwin just plays 3 wide receiver sets, and in that case, Johnson's going to be usable at least until Mike Evans comes back, but I do think that Godwin gets more involved. Johnson has a lot of bad matchups coming up as well. And Alec Imanor, he's injured. We know that DK is probably the guy to own in that offense, and that's if you're going to own any wide receiver. So if DK is available in your league, then you should be dropping Imanor. And if DK is taken, you're in a very deep league, then you're not in a shallow league, and you're fine. And quarterbacks and tight end, Sam Laporta looks like he's likely out for the season. So unless you have an IR spot that you're not using for anything else, then Laporta is droppable. And Njoku lost a lot of snaps to Harold Fannin in the last week, and it does seem it's trending in that direction. I do admit Njoku is coming back from a little bit of an injury, and that may be why that happened, but still hard to feel excited about him. In most leagues, he's droppable. Maybe in a particularly deep league, you can hold on just one more week to see what happens. The kind of league where Brock Wright has you excited is the kind of league where I'm holding on to David Njoku. Luke Musgrave is splitting not only with John Fitzpatrick, but also with Josh Wiley as well. That's a horrible situation for the Packers. He's droppable. Noah Fant with Mike Gesicki coming back is not interesting to me. Neither is Dawson Knox, with the likelihood of Dalton Kincaid coming back. If Kincaid doesn't come back, maybe in some leagues, Knox is startable in that Brock Wright sort of area. Cade Otton with Chris Godwin coming back is droppable to me as well in most leagues. If we want to go quarterbacks, and Sam Darnold, I mean, he played okay last week after a terrible game in week 11, but realistically, he's got some awful matchups coming up for the last 5 weeks of the season. I can't see a week where you're excited about starting him. For me, he's droppable in most leagues, unless there's really no reliable quarterbacks available at all. Joe Flacco also droppable with the likelihood that Joe Burrow is back. Maybe just wait to see we get an absolute confirmation of Burrow playing, but for me, Flacco is droppable. And Jordan Love, I don't see it. In most leagues, in a shallower league at least, I'm dropping him because I think there's likely better options available on waivers. And that's all we've got for the Fantasy First Down Waiver Wire Show for Week 13. Please make sure you hit us up on our socials, Fantasy First Down on Twitter and at the Fantasy First Down on Instagram if you've got any questions, or you can just comment below as well. I'll see you guys in a couple of days for the Stream and Stash Show.